Good evening. Imagine a night where the world holds its breath. The stars sharpen like pinpricks of fire, and the air itself trembles with the weight of possibility. Tonight we step into a village in France in the year 1714, a place where the church bell marks every hour, and every life is expected to march in rhythm with it. But beneath that rhythm beats a restless heart, and tonight that heart is about to make a choice that will unravel time itself. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to Novel Whisper Official and comment below the title of the novel you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Now the story begins. A girl kneels in the dust of her small room, her palms pressed so tightly together that her knuckles ache. Her name is Addie LaRue. She has known since childhood that she does not fit inside the narrow walls of her village or the narrow walls of the life that has been prepared for her. She has seen it in the eyes of men, in the wagging tongues of women, in the way her parents already arrange her fate as if she were a thread to be woven into someone else's tapestry. Tomorrow she is to be wed. Tomorrow she will cease to be Adeline and become someone's wife, someone's possession, bound to hearth and child and duty. Tomorrow she will be buried alive in a life she did not choose. And so tonight, she prays. She has always prayed since she was little. Not to the God inside the church with its cold walls and carved saints, but to the gods of the woods, the ones she imagines still linger beyond the edges of fields, hidden in the shadows of old trees. Estelle, the wise woman of the village, once warned her never to pray to the gods who answer after dark. That is the only rule. Adeline has carried that warning in her chest for years like an ember, but tonight she breaks it. Her tears soak into the dirt floor. She whispers her desperation into the silence, the way one might whisper to a lover. "I want freedom," she says. "I want more time. I do not want to belong to anyone but myself." The air changes. The candle sputters, though no wind moves. Her heart begins to pound. She feels it then, a presence pressing against her skin, brushing her neck like the ghost of a kiss. Shadows lengthen, and from them a figure steps forth. He looks almost human. His eyes gleam like the midnight sky, filled with infinite depth. His smile is carved from hunger. He is beautiful in the way fire is beautiful. Something you should never touch, but cannot stop watching. Addie should scream. Instead, she stares, because for the first time someone has come, someone has listened. He circles her slowly, a predator savoring the moment. "You called, little flame," he murmurs, his voice like velvet and smoke. "And I have come." Her throat is dry. "I don't want to be married," she whispers. "I don't want a cage. I want to live. I want to see the world. I want freedom." He tilts his head and his eyes glitter with cruel amusement. "And what would you give to live as you wish?" She thinks of her soul, though she does not truly believe she has one. She thinks of eternity, though she cannot imagine it. She thinks of tomorrow, of standing at the altar, her wrists bound by duty. And she cannot bear it. "Anything," she says, "everything." His smile widens. The shadows coil tighter. He leans close enough that she can smell the earth on him, the scent of roots and decay. Then it is done. The room collapses into silence. Her chest feels as if it is cracking open. She gasps, but no sound comes. The figure vanishes into the darkness, leaving only a faint trace of cold. Addie does not know yet what she is invited in. She does not know what she has lost. She only knows that tomorrow will not come, not as it was meant to. She rises from the floor trembling and steps into the night. The moon watches, pale and merciless, as Addie LaRue is remade. Morning comes, bright and merciless. The bell tolls, calling the village to gather, but Addie wakes with a strange lightness, as if she has stepped out of a cage without knowing the bars had opened. Her parents call her name, Their voices heavy with duty, and she delays, lingering in the small moments of freedom. The chill air on her skin, the golden streak of sun across her bed. The wedding dress waits for her, folded like a shroud. She stares at it and feels nothing but defiance. The memory of the shadowed figure lingers, his voice curling like smoke around her mind. It is done. She dresses slowly, not in white, but in her usual clothes. And when her father's angry knock shakes the door, she feels her lips curve into a smile. Today she will not walk to the altar. But something is wrong. Her mother bursts in, eyes wild. "Addie," she says, her voice trembling. "Where have you been?" "We couldn't find you." Addie blinks. She has been here the whole time. Yet the way her mother looks at her, confused and unsettled, makes her stomach twist. At the church, the groom stands waiting. She sees the crowd assembled, faces she has known all her life. She tries to step forward to say she will not do this, but their eyes slide past her as if she is smoke. She speaks, and her voice falls into silence. Their gazes land on her body, then skitter away unanchored. She reaches for her father's arm. He jerks back, startled, as though a stranger has touched him. Her mother gasps. And then, with a terrible clarity, Addie understands. They do not know her. Not her parents, not her friends, not the man who was meant to claim her hand. Her deal was struck, and this is its cost. The god of the shadows has given her freedom, yes. Freedom from bonds, freedom from belonging, freedom from being known. She cannot be held. She cannot be remembered. Addie flees the church. No one calls her back. By the time she crosses the village square, she has already vanished from their minds. The hours that follow are a blur of disbelief and dawning terror. She runs to Estelle's cottage, the old woman who once warned her never to pray to the dark. Estelle opens the door, eyes soft with recognition, then falters, her gaze clouding. She tilts her head as if listening for a memory that slips away. "Who are you?" Estelle asks. Addie stumbles back, throat burning. The world has forgotten her in seconds. She cries out into the woods, into the gathering dusk, demanding the shadow to show himself. And he does. Luke, he calls himself, though she does not yet know to hate the name. He stands beneath the trees, his shape carved from shadow and moonlight, and watches her crumble. "You gave me your soul," he reminds her. "I gave you what you asked. You tricked me," she spits, voice hoarse. His smile is a blade. "No, little flame. You asked for freedom, and now you are free. No bonds, no chains, no one to own you, no one to remember you." Her knees buckle. "What good is freedom," she whispers, "if no one knows you exist?" Luke only laughs. The sound echoes like thunder among the trees. Then he is gone, and the silence closes in. Addie wanders back into the village, half mad with grief. She presses herself into the crowd, hoping for some thread of recognition. Nothing. She begs a baker for bread. He blinks, then forgets her the moment she turns away. She steals because she must, and when caught, the thief is forgotten as soon as she is out of sight. Hours ago, she was Addie LaRue, daughter, friend, bride-to-be. Now she is no one, a ghost with a beating heart, a girl untethered from memory. Night falls again, and she curls in the shadow of the woods, weeping until her throat is raw. She does not yet understand how to live with this curse. She only knows the unbearable truth. To the world, she is already invisible. The first weeks are chaos. Hunger gnaws, cold bites, and Addie stumbles through a world that cannot hold her. She learns quickly that she cannot linger anywhere. For the moment she leaves a room, the memory of her vanishes from every face inside it. Doors close on her as if she had never knocked. Promises break before they are finished being spoken. She steals bread from stalls, darting away before she can be caught, though there is no need. The vendor's anger melts into confusion the instant she disappears into the crowd. She sleeps in barns, in forests, under eaves, learning that even when she is seen, she is not known. At first, she clings to her old life. She returns to her village, tries again to speak to her parents, to catch Estelle's gaze. Each attempt ends the same: recognition for a heartbeat, then the emptiness of forgetting. The pain is worse than if they had died because they are alive and well, yet she is already lost to them. Addie drifts farther. She walks until the landscape changes, until the roads unravel into strange towns where no one could have known her even if memory allowed it. She thinks perhaps this will be easier, that strangers will lessen the sting. But the truth is crueler. There is no difference between strangers and family when all of them forget her the same. Nights are hardest. Loneliness thickens in the dark, and every shadow seems to curl with Luke's laughter. Sometimes he appears leaning against a tree or a doorway, his smile sharp as glass. He watches her struggle as one watches a play, amused and distant. "You wanted freedom," he reminds her. "This is what it looks like." She spits at him, curses him, pleads with him, but Luke never wavers. He offers temptations instead: a warm home, a soft bed, love that would not vanish if only she surrenders and gives up the game. She refuses, though every refusal feels weaker than the last. Days pass into weeks, weeks into months. Addie becomes a shadow herself, silent and watchful. She learns to read people quickly, to slip coins from pockets, to charm her way into taverns where a glass of wine or a bowl of stew can be coaxed from a smile even if it vanishes moments later. Her reflection in windows and rivers becomes a stranger. Her eyes wider, her cheeks hollowed by hunger, her hands dirty with survival. She begins to wonder if she will unravel, if forgetting is contagious, and one day even she will forget her own name. Then one evening she discovers something unexpected. A musician plays on a street corner, a melody soft and wistful. Addie lingers, unnoticed. When he finishes, she hums the tune back to him, altering it slightly, weaving a new thread. He laughs, delighted, though he does not ask her name. By the next day, he has forgotten her. But he remembers the song. He plays it again, and people stop to listen. Addie realizes the curse has cracks. She cannot be remembered, but ideas can. Songs, sketches, whispers. They outlive the forgetting. She cannot leave a name, but she can leave marks in other ways, subtle fingerprints pressed into the fabric of art and thought. This revelation keeps her alive. She begins to test it, pushing into the edges of possibility. She suggests lines to poets, images to painters, fragments of melodies to musicians who never recall her but carry her gift forward. It is not permanence, not recognition, but it is something. And yet every night when the streets empty and she lies alone beneath the stars, the weight of her solitude presses down. A world without witnesses is not freedom. It is exile. Still, she endures. She learns to survive in a world that forgets her. She learns to bend, but not to break. And in that silent defiance, Addie LaRue begins to discover who she truly is. He finds her at thresholds. Doorways seem to breed him, the way fog breeds in hollows, the way night collects in the angles of a room. She will be reaching for a handle and he will be there, shoulder pressed to the frame, eyes bright with that predator's patience, as if the whole world is a slow game and he enjoys every move she's forced to make. The first time he returns after the bargain, weeks have already carved lines into her hunger. Addie has stolen a loaf in a place by a hearth in a roadside inn, the kind with smoke-stained beams and a cracked lute on the wall. She sits with her back to the fire, gleaning warmth in cautious sips, and watches the doorway the way wounded animals watch the edges of the wood. When he steps through, the room brightens and darkens at once. Heads turn and then slide away. The innkeeper blinks, frowns, forgets. "Little flame," he says, tasting the pet name as though it were a sponge sugar he plans to dissolve on his tongue. "How do you like your freedom?" She does not answer. She shoves the crust into her mouth and chews until it hurts. He looks pleased not by her silence but by the defiance it dresses. He does not sit. He never does at first. He leans. He circles. He invades only by implication. Freedom is always cold in the beginning, he says. It is a mountain at night. It is a sea in winter. But you asked for the horizon, and I have given you everyone. You took everything else, she forces out, nothing you were not ready to lose. He says it gently, and the gentleness is worse than mockery. You did not want a husband, a home, a plot of earth. You wanted the world. I am only a generous cartographer. She wants to spit at him and finds her body still as a coin. What do you want? I am patient, he says, tilting his head, dark hair grazing his jaw. I will wait for you to tire of this. Then you will give me what is mine. He means her soul. He means surrender. He means an end to the ache, purchased at the price of everything that aches. She lifts her chin. I will not tire. His smile carries 100 winters. We shall see. He leaves the way the tide leaves a shore, retreating without apology. The room exhales. The fire crackles again like a clock restarting. Addie stares at the empty doorway and hates thresholds for the first time. He returns in a spring city that smells of bread and rain, when she has learned to sleep on rooftops and wake with dawns dyeing the world. He appears beside a church door. The stone is damp, the bells gnarled with morning birds. She has pressed her palms to the wood not to pray, but to feel the thrum of a service she can never join. Hungry? He asks, holding an apple he does not offer. Always. He lifts the apple and takes a slow bite. Juice glosses his mouth. All appetites are patience in costume, he says. They teach you how to wait. And you? She asks. What teaches you? Time. He smiles with too many centuries. And you. He does little things that promise much. Once he passes a hand through the air and the rain does not touch her for the length of a street. Once he touches the edge of her sleeve and the fabric dries at once, sun-warm and smelling faintly of wild thyme. Once he lays 2 fingers against her wrist, finding the place her pulse races and every sound in the city hushes as if the world holds its breath. All of this, he says softly, belongs to you if you only ask. A room that remembers, a bed that welcomes, a voice that calls you by name. Yours, you mean? Mine, he agrees, and you would be remembered. I would see you. For a moment, that promise is a door cracked on a lit room. She stands in the corridor of her life and feels the heat brush her face. Then she steps back. I will not pay with what remains. He shakes his head as if indulging a child who refuses a coat and walks out into snow. Stubbornness is not virtue, Adeline. It is survival. He laughs and the laughter rattles the bells. He comes in summer when she has crossed into Germany and learned to speak like a river, taking the shape of every bank. She slips through markets and taverns, planting ideas like seeds she'll never see bloom. In a painter's studio, she leaves a smudge of charcoal on a boy's thumb and murmurs, "Give her 7 freckle constellations." Years later, she will see the portrait in a window and know that the boy remembered the freckles even if he did not remember her. Luke appears in that studio's doorway, watching her watch the painting. Pretty, he says, and the word sounds like an offense he can't resist. You have found your loopholes. They are not loopholes, she says, they are roots. Roots grow toward graves, he replies, amused, and when she flinches, he steps closer. Do not be afraid, little flame, I have time, so do you, for now. She discovers rules because pain teaches them. She cannot say her name and make it stick, but she can write it and the ink fades. She cannot keep objects, for they become misplaced around her like thoughts people do not mean to have. Yet she learns that bargains have seams. If she steals a ring, it will vanish the first time she is out of sight, but if someone gives it freely, the gift will hold until their eyes go blank again. She learns to ask in the exact breath of kindness. A scarf here, a book there. They drift out of her hands like moths at dawn, but for an hour they are hers. Luke watches her amass these tiny victories. He visits doorways of theaters where she slips into the balcony and lets music braid the empty space inside her. He appears in the frame of a bookshop when she runs her fingers down a spine like a lover. "You cannot keep it," he says. "I can keep what it leaves." "What is that?" "Words," she says. "They are better than shelters. They are countries." He studies her the way astronomers study comets, curious how far she will go before she breaks. He brings winter into summer rooms and summer into winter lanes, always a degree off the season, as if to remind her he stands outside the weather of her life. There are nights he arrives not as threat but as mirror. She sits on the lip of a fountain and he sits on the edge of shadow. She tells him nothing. He tells her less. Yet he asks questions that undress the loneliness. What would you do with a day that belonged to you alone? What would you build if it did not vanish? Who would you love if he could love you back? The questions are traps, of course. She answers them anyway in the privacy of her mind. Once on a road between cities, he falls into step beside her and says almost idly, "I could make you a house." "A house forgets," she says. "Not my house." She imagines it against her will. A door that opens every time she reaches it. A kettle that remembers how she takes her tea. A bed that knows her outline. The ache is so sharp she must look away. No. Why? Because it would be yours. He smiles as if she has brought him a bouquet of thorns. Everything is mine eventually, not me. You gave me your soul. When I am done with it, she says, and hates that her voice trembles. He stops, the road stretching like a ribbon between fields. Wind combs the grain. "You are the only mortal I have ever met," he says, "who treats eternity like a dare." "Maybe I am the only mortal," she says, "one who has no choice." Their dance becomes a calendar, a constellation of meetings that map a century's sky. He arrives at thresholds of plague houses she slips past, of palaces whose balls she haunts like music, of ships where she buys a single day's passage with a kiss and loses it the moment the sailor turns his back. He is always there when she is most hollow or most whole, as if he feeds equally upon despair and triumph. He tempts her with intimacy the way hunters lay salt in the path of deer. He speaks her name like a secret. He suggests that love is only a word for the relief of being recognized. He says he could recognize her forever. She builds a shield out of stubborn rituals. She counts doors before she enters, making a talisman of numbers. She touches wood 3 times when she thinks of him, as if knocking on the earth might summon a kinder god. She hums the street musician's altered melody when the dark feels thick enough to smother. She refuses him each time, even when refusal feels like sanding bone. The day she laughs in his presence, really laughs, startles them both. It is Paris, a blue-washed morning where bread steam curls from bakery mouths and painters clutter the Seine with easels. He says something dry about human fashions, about wigs like birds' nests and shoes that punish feet for the sin of standing. She barks a laugh before she can swallow it. His eyes flare, then soften. For a heartbeat, he looks almost young. "Careful," he says quietly. "Kindness is a more dangerous trap than cruelty." "You mistake me," she answers. "I was not being kind. You were simply funny." The word lands between them like a coin. He steps closer and the air tilts. "You will say yes one day, and you will ask forever." He nods, delighted by the geometry of that promise. "Forever is my native tongue." Addie turns from the doorway and steps into the light. She does not look back. He does not stop her. Their game continues, played at thresholds, measured in refusals that become a kind of prayer. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Time becomes a river and she learns to float. It carries her out of one century and into the next, the banks changing shape while the current feels the same against her skin. She walks roads rutted by cartwheels and later feels the iron breath of trains whip her skirts as they scream past, all motion and modern promise. She watches streets grow gas lamps like yellow fruit and then watches those lamps vanish into the pale hum of electricity, a new kind of dawn that arrives every night. In Paris, she learns the perfume of revolutions. It smells of damp cobble and hot bread, of fear stewing under speeches, of ink-staining hands that raised pamphlets like knives. She doesn't need a date to know when the city is about to crack. The air grows tight and metallic. The words people use get sharper, as if language itself is arming. She keeps to doorways and rooftops, listens at windows, and moves before the breaking. Freedom has taught her to read a storm long before it forms. She threads cafes where ideas are exchanged like contraband, and artists argue themselves hoarse about beauty and truth. She prefers the smoky corners where the talk thins out into sketchbooks and the clatter of cups. There, she learns to seed notions like pollen. She leans over a shoulder and murmurs, "Make the light the subject." She tilts a page and says, "Let the street be the frame." She is never invited to the table, never remembered when the argument ends, but sometimes, weeks later, she passes a poster or a painting and hears the echo of her own whisper caught inside it. Music keeps saving her in small, repeatable ways. A violinist on a bridge finds a new cadence because she hums it into being as she passes. A pianist in a salon repeats a broken chord until she sits beside the instrument and taps the unresolved note. He glances, nods without knowing why, and the melody learns to breathe. Songs are a currency she can spend without leaving proof of purchase. She learns Europe by footfall. The Alps rise like knuckles, and she crosses between them by following goat paths and the kind of maps sketched in tavern chalk and wiped away by morning. Rome is a museum with a sky for a ceiling. Vienna is sugar and precision until night falls and desire blooms in the keyholes. In Berlin, she witnesses hunger turn to rage and then to trance, a city hypnotized by a man's voice, and she moves on before the spell hardens. The century turns, and she watches a new kind of speed devour distance. Steel rails stitch countries together. Letters cross oceans quicker than ships do. Photographs pin moments to paper like butterflies in glass cases. She stands in front of them and feels a peculiar ache, as if the world is learning to remember everything except her. She smiles at the irony, and then the smile breaks and she keeps walking. War comes like weather. She avoids the fronts not because she is afraid of death. Death cannot find her yet. But because the forgetting there is worse than any curse. Men forget themselves, forget mercy, forget the difference between a prayer and an order. She keeps to the margins and tends small braveries. She wraps a scarf around a nurse's shoulders on a frost-bitten morning and feels the woman's relief like a lantern briefly cupped in her hands. She carries water to a station platform and presses it into a stranger's palms. And when she turns away, he forgets her and remembers only that kindness exists, which is enough. Afterward, the world staggers and drinks and pretends to have learned something. She stands in a basement club where the air is half smoke and half saxophone, and for an hour she feels almost visible because the music sees everyone at once. A painter sketches by candlelight, and she knows by the way his hand trembles that she has become an outline again, a face he cannot keep but will keep trying to catch. Later, she will recognize herself in a gallery window, not as a name, but as a persistence. Dark hair, the freckle constellation, a look that never entirely belongs to the century around it. She will stop and study the lines and feel the strangest relief. Someone remembered the shape of forgetting. Luke appears when the centuries change clothes. He likes thresholds even time cannot ignore. Once as fireworks stitch up a new year, he steps from a stairwell with the smell of winter on his coat and says, "Still afloat, little flame?" She refuses to answer, not out of spite, but because she is busy watching the sky. He follows her gaze and makes a small, bored motion with his fingers. For an instant, the sparks freeze mid-air, a spray of paused stars. She does not look at him. "Let them fall," she says, and he does. He never tires of testing what she will ask for or won't. He is the only constant she does not want. Cities are rebuilt, borders redrawn, songs replaced. But Luke remains a line under everything. He does not age. He does not hurry. He simply collects moments of her like a naturalist collecting pressed leaves, certain that time itself will work for him if he is patient. "You will ask for rest," he says in Florence at dusk, in Lisbon at noon, in a London fog that tastes of coal. "You will ask for warmth." She answers with motion. She keeps going. There are years when she grows sleek and sly on good fortune. A patron takes a shine to her in a way he cannot explain and presses coins into her palm with a smile that insists on generosity. A dressmaker gifts her a coat for luck, and the coat is real for as long as she wears it. The moment she shrugs it off, it becomes another mislaid thing in a stranger's life. She learns to keep what keeps her moving. Boots that carry her a season, pockets enough for a crust and a coin, a ribbon to tie back her hair so she can think. There are years when she is nothing but edges. Winters chew the meat from her determination. Summers burn the patience down to ember. She survives because she has made a discipline of curiosity. When misery threatens to flood, she looks instead hard and exact at the world. A lark rising from a hedgerow. The rough mercy of a baker sliding a second roll across the counter because some instinct tugged at his hand. The way light uses rain to write itself across the air. She hoards these details the way other people hoard proof of their lives. They are her proof. Once in a gallery where the rich keep their baptisms of beauty, she finds herself in front of a painting that hurts to look at. A girl in profile, a mouth set as if she is holding back a secret in a flood. 7 freckles like stars mapping a private sky. No signature explains the compulsion, no plaque tells the tale. Addie stands there long enough for the guard to clear his throat and gesture politely. She nods and steps away. But the image moves with her, stitched to the inside of her ribs. You can be forgotten and still become a story. This is how she keeps walking. History keeps doing what it does, falling apart and building itself again. She learns to fold into cities the way a blade folds into a handle, invisible until needed. She speaks less and listens more because listening lets her live in rooms that would otherwise push her back out into weather. She kisses once when she knows the person will not remember, not out of cruelty but because for a heartbeat the contact is real and that is sometimes enough. She lays a hand on a window and feels heat from 1,000 dinners cooked behind it. Families she will never join, and believes in them just the same. When the century tips again and the world grows wires and screens, she recognizes a fresh kind of hunger. People want to be seen so badly that they scatter themselves in every bright window they can find. She stands outside those windows and watches the glow spill onto sidewalks and faces, and even though none of it will ever keep her, she feels strangely less alone. The civilization of remembering has simply changed its tools. Stories still do the work. Through it all, she keeps an internal calendar that has nothing to do with dates. First snowfall on a Paris rooftop she doesn't fall from. The day an inventor's balloon drifts across a field and a crowd runs as if they could catch the sky. The night she does not cry even though everything in her insists it would be a relief. The morning she laughs alone in a square because a dog steals a baker's hat and refuses to give it back. Mile markers, all of them fixed points in a life that must be carried without witnesses. Centuries unfold like a paper fan and do not close. She is not who she was in the village, and she will not be who she is now for long. But the thread runs unbroken. a promise made to herself on a night when the candle sputtered and the dark leaned in. She will live. She will choose. She will not belong to anyone, not even to despair. And somewhere, even if she never sees it, a story will keep the shape of her going. She begins to understand the curse not as a wall, but as a maze, full of hidden doors if she dares to push hard enough. She cannot be remembered, yet she learns there are ways to leave her fingerprints on the world. They are not the broad strokes she once dreamed of, no monuments, no names carved into stone, but faint, enduring impressions like pressed flowers slipped between pages. It starts with art. Painters she befriends for a single night wake the next morning compelled by an image they cannot explain. A freckled face with eyes that carry too many storms. They never recall the girl who posed in the dim candlelight of their studio, but her likeness stains their canvas all the same. Addie sees herself again and again, in sketches pinned to tavern walls, in unfinished portraits at the edges of galleries, in the faces of statues that wear her shadow. Music follows. She hums snatches of melodies into the ears of strangers who play them back on strings and keys, and though her voice is gone with the dawn, the tune lingers. Sometimes she hears her ghost songs years later, woven into symphonies or carried by a violinist across a quiet bridge, and she knows the echo is hers. She discovers she cannot write her name. Ink dissolves, chalk smears, letters slip away. But she can shape the words of others. A whispered phrase will lodge like a seed in someone else's mind, sprouting days later into a poem, a line in a play, a stanza sung on a street corner. She becomes a phantom muse, the kind who leaves no credit but leaves fire behind. The realization gives her strength. For so long she has been at war with erasure, clutching desperately at scraps of existence only to watch them vanish. Now she sees the loophole. She cannot be remembered as herself, but she can be remembered in what remains: the paintings, the songs, the stories that will outlive her. She begins to weave her rebellion carefully. She lingers in ateliers and cafes, sparking conversations she knows will outlast her. She guides artists toward visions they do not understand but cannot ignore. Sometimes the spark is small, a shift of light, a new word for a familiar ache. Sometimes it is monumental. A playwright once hears her murmur of a bargain with the gods and years later pens a tragedy that electrifies Paris. She stands in the back row of the theater unseen while the crowd gasps at lines that are hers, reshaped through another man's mouth. Luke notices, of course. He always notices. He steps from the shadows of a concert hall after a pianist plays one of her phantom melodies, and his smile is a blade. "You think you are clever," he says, "but you are still invisible. No one applauds for you." "I don't need their applause," she replies. "I just need the world to change a little because I was here." He tilts his head, amused. "And when the painter dies, when the music fades, when even the stories crumble to dust, then I'll make more," she says simply. For the first time, Luke's smile falters. He recovers quickly, but she has seen it. Her refusal is not just stubbornness, it is a weapon. Decades pass, marked not by calendars but by echoes. She sees her freckles on a marble bust in Rome, her voice in a song hummed by a child in London, her laugh hidden in a story told in a Berlin bar. She begins to walk lighter, no longer hollow but filled with these fragments of herself scattered across the earth. And yet the cost still cuts. No matter how many marks she leaves, she cannot share them with anyone. She cannot turn to a friend and say, "That's me." She cannot trace her own history with another hand in hers. Her victories are secret, her triumphs lonely, but when the nights are cold and she fears her soul will fracture under the weight of invisibility, she clings to the small rebellions. She whispers to herself the oldest promise, the one made on that night in Villon when the shadows answered, "I will not yield. I will not vanish. I will not belong to you. I will not." And as centuries stretch before her, Addie LaRue refuses to let the world forget. Not entirely. Not entirely. Not entirely. Not entirely. Not entirely. Loneliness sharpens into something heavier than hunger, deeper than cold. It becomes a weight she carries through centuries, pressing on her chest no matter how far she walks. There are days when she feels strong enough to bear it, when the thrill of survival or the echo of her influence lifts her. But there are nights when she cannot stand the silence anymore, when invisibility feels like a coffin with no end. She learns to dread the twilight hours most. At dusk, the world pauses, suspended between memory and forgetting. Faces blur together, voices collapse into echoes, and Addie feels herself slipping into nothing. She will sit in a tavern corner, nursing a cup of wine she cannot pay for, and watch as someone meets her eyes with sudden warmth, then blinks and looks away, the warmth gone, as if it never existed. That absence burns worse than fire. The truth is simple. She can endure hunger, exhaustion, and the scorn of strangers, but she cannot endure being unseen. She longs for a hand to reach for hers and not let go. She longs for permanence, not fame, not fortune, but recognition. To be known, to be remembered. Luke knows this. He always knows. He appears in her weakest moments. When she huddles beneath bridges during storms, shivering until her teeth ache, he steps into the shadows with dry clothes draped over his arm. When she wanders half mad with fever, he kneels beside her, cool hand brushing her forehead, his voice soft as silk. Just say the word, little flame, and I will end this ache. She refuses every time, though sometimes the refusal is nothing more than a whisper. She would rather be broken than owned, but the loneliness festers. There are winters when she lets herself imagine surrender. She pictures a warm house, a fire that remembers her face, a lover who never forgets her name. She imagines laying down her burden, placing her soul into Luke's waiting hands. He would keep her. He would love her in his way. The thought is both temptation and terror, and yet each time she nearly falters, something pulls her back. A song drifting through an open window, a painting that carries her freckles, the laughter of strangers who remind her that life, even unseen, still thrums with beauty. She clings to those moments as if they were lifelines. Still the centuries stretch on, and exhaustion grows like a shadow across her heart. In one city, she steals into a party full of gilded mirrors and jeweled masks. She dances with a dozen strangers who forget her the moment the song ends. She smiles until her cheeks ache, but when the music stops, she is more alone than before. She slips into the garden, collapses against the cold stone of a fountain, and weeps. Luke is there, of course, always there. He crouches beside her, the night curling around him like a cloak. "Why do you fight me still?" he asks, not cruel but curious, as though she were a puzzle he has yet to solve. She raises her tear-streaked face. "Because if I give in, then nothing matters. And if nothing matters, then why did I beg to live?" For the first time, he does not answer. His silence feels heavier than his words, as though even he cannot unravel the knot she has tied around her soul. But the silence does not comfort her. She is still alone when he vanishes, still invisible, still forgotten. That night, she makes herself another promise. She will endure. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because defiance itself is a kind of existence. She will not let him win, no matter how hollow she feels. And so Addie LaRue lives on, carrying her loneliness like a scar, never healed but never fatal. She is weary, but she is still standing. And sometimes, in the darkest hours, survival itself feels like victory. New York greets her with noise that never ends. It is a tide of sirens and subway brakes, of laughter rising from sidewalks and steam hissing from the ribs of the street. The city is a machine that runs on attention, and for the first time in centuries, Addie steps into a place that worships the very thing she cannot keep. Faces glow in handheld windows, names scatter like confetti across timelines. People document their dinners, their steps, their shadows. The ache of watching a world obsessed with remembering while it continually forgets her should be unbearable. But instead it feels like a dare. If memory is the new currency, she will learn how to spend around it. She builds a life out of seams. Morning begins in a park where the trees are disciplined into avenues of quiet, Central Park's lungs breathing mist. She runs fingers along iron fences that never warm to her. Pigeons jostle like petty gods for crumbs. She knows which benches hold heat longer, which restrooms in museums can be slipped into without a ticket if you join the right stream of tourists. She keeps a mental map that has nothing to do with attractions, and everything to do with escape routes and refuges. The church on Lexington where the side door sticks but yields. The gallery in Chelsea where the guard talks loudly about fantasy football and never looks up. The bakery that prints your face into latte foam and where she smiles at the absurdity of a city that will remember coffee but not her. Addie dresses from the city's cast-offs. Vintage stores become partners in a dance that relies on distraction and kindness timed to the second. Try-ons dissolve the minute she steps out of sight, but gifts stick until the giver forgets. She compliments a clerk's nail art, listens to the story of a sister who moved to Queens, and in that warm afterglow the clerk tucks a silk scarf into Addie's hands with a conspiratorial grin. "For luck," she says. The scarf will stay until the woman turns to help another customer. And then it will be another unaccounted absence in a life already full of them. Addie knots it at her throat and walks out into winter that bites like honesty. She haunts museums the way saints haunt churches. In the Met, she stands inches from paint as old as her curse and finds proof that survival becomes beauty if you give it time. In MoMA, she watches strangers stand in white rooms and argue about a single line on a canvas, the argument itself becoming the art. She leans into those conversations with quiet nudges. "Let the absence be the subject," she breathes, and a curator later writes a plaque that speaks of negative space as presence. She cannot be credited, but she can be catalytic. Afternoons pull her downtown to bookshops where the air tastes like paper and restless hope. She has lived long enough to recognize the old hunger wearing a new face. People still gather around stories because stories make them feel looked at by something larger. Addie touches spines like praying. She reads opening lines and feels the city's pulse in every paragraph. She learns which shelves are watched and which are blind, which staffers will talk for 20 minutes about a book that changed them, which corners let a ghost sit undisturbed and turn pages as if the words could stitch her into being. Technology cuts two ways. Phones make it easy to borrow kindness and return it before the person remembers they offered it. Apps turn doors into puzzles. She cannot book rooms in her name, cannot hold reservations, cannot file forms. She learns to catch doors with her foot, to slide into lobbies with tour groups, to ride elevators until housekeeping opens a closet and forgets, as soon as she turns away, why she was given an extra towel or a small stack of tiny soaps that feel like treasure. Her pockets carry both centuries and the present. A subway card borrowed on a smile, a coin the size of a thumbnail struck in 1798, and a museum ticket someone left on a bench with the timestamp still warm. Luke visits New York as if the city were his own slick reflection. He appears in the revolving door of a hotel, in the steel ribs of a fire escape, in the blue-hour buzz when office lights flick on like constellations. "You have found a place addicted to you," he says, admiring the skyline without looking at it. They crave the performance of being seen. You are the absence that makes the craving honest. She is tired of his metaphors. "I am busy," she says, because it is true. New York does not allow idleness. Even standing still feels like trespass. He steps closer, the heat of the street slipping around him as if he's learned to part it. I could make this easier, little flame. A lease that keeps your name, a key that remembers your hand, a body beside yours that will not forget. She studies him in the reflection of a dark window. He looks like every good decision that ruins you. You keep offering cages, she says. You only change the paint. Luke sighs as if bored by her accuracy. I offer relief. I have learned to make my own. She does. Relief becomes a ritual, a gallery opening where she drifts through a ring of strangers and plants a phrase in a poet's ear like a coin into a slot. A late-night diner where the waitress draws galaxies in spilled salt while Addie wonders whether the city ever sleeps or only pretends to. Rooftop bars where wind scours the edges of her and leaves her more herself. River walks where the bridges speak in iron vowels. She isn't happy, but happiness has lost its tyranny. Purpose is enough. Motion is enough. She keeps leaving small storms in other people's skies. A photographer in Bushwick, frustrated and ready to quit, feels a stranger's shadow pause and say, "Let the blur tell the truth." Weeks later, a series of long exposure portraits goes viral for making the city's haste visible, and the artist stares at the images with a confusion that tastes like a memory he can't swallow. A songwriter busking in the Union Square station tries to fix a chorus that will not land until a woman passing by snaps once off beat, and he hears where the rhythm must break. He looks up, but the crowd has already carried her away. Nights find her in a narrow East Village bar where candles turn faces into stories. She likes that the bartender remembers everyone else and always asks her the same first question. It is almost comforting to be reset. Life becomes a loop with variations, and loops can be danced. The bar keeps a jukebox. She feeds it $1 rescued from the mouth of a dryer and a laundromat where she doesn't belong and chooses the same song every time, an old standard that feels like a promise whispered through a tin can. The regulars will never notice the pattern. She will. Patterns are how she proves to herself that she exists across days. Rain writes the city in a new hand. On wet nights, she moves through reflections, doubled and tripled in glass. She watches couples argue under shared umbrellas and feels both envy and relief that she answers to no one's temper. She watches dogs refuse puddles with comic dignity. She watches neon turn sidewalks into runways for ghosts. On those nights, Luke sometimes falls in step, his coat unmarked by rain as if weather itself refuses to touch him. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't press. He simply keeps pace, and that is almost worse. Companionship without recognition is a cruelty she will not accept, so she changes streets without saying goodbye. Sleep happens wherever the city forgets to police itself. Church pews warmed by organ rehearsals, library chairs claimed by the drowse that follows long reading. The high line at dawn, when the gardeners arrive and do not question the woman sitting with her knees drawn up, absorbing the first light as if it were a private language. She measures rest not in hours, but in degrees of safety. On a narrow street in the village, she finds a small shop whose windows fog in winter and sweat in summer, where the shelves lean like old men listening, and where the front table is always stacked with new stories trying to be born. She has passed it 100 times without naming the pull it exerts. Bookshops are dangerous. They promise permanence. They hoard names. They make people into spines that outlast bodies. But she is tired of caution. New York has taught her that some doors are worth opening even when you know they will not stay open. She wraps the silk scarf closer and pushes in. A bell rings, that old ceremony. Paper breathes. Somewhere, a record player crackles into life with something soft. She feels the city narrow to a manageable size, the way thunder narrows to a single strike. She moves between tables, touching covers the way some people touch altars. A clerk passes with an armful of books and does not look at her. That is normal. That is safe. Addie lingers at a display of used hardcovers, the kind with stories worn into their corners. She opens one and inhales the dust, which smells like basements, and basements smell like secrets. The page shows a name scrawled decades ago in a hand that tried to be grand and failed. She smiles for that stranger, for that need to claim a little square of time. She puts the book back and reaches for another, a voice gentle behind her. "Can I help you find anything?" No one asks her that. Not like that. She turns, ready for the usual dance, the smile, the small talk, the slip into nothing, and meets a pair of eyes that do not slide off her face. A young man stands there, his expression open, a little sheepish, as if he has interrupted someone he actually sees. The air in the shop tilts almost imperceptibly, as if a compass has noticed true north again. Addie feels something she has not felt in 300 years. The tremor of possibility. He is ordinary in the way storms are ordinary from far away. A wool coat, a thin scarf, a face kind because it hasn't learned how not to be. His hair is a little wrong from fingers, his eyes tired in the way of people who read late. The bookshop gathers around him as if he is one of its fixtures, a human shelf that knows where things belong. "Can I help you find anything?" he asks, and the words should vanish the way all greetings do. But when she answers, careful, casual, the choreography of a life built on exits, his gaze doesn't slide off her. He listens. The listening holds. Addie tests him without seeming to. She turns away, lingers in a different aisle. He circles the floor, chatting softly with a couple at the table, restocking a stack, then passes her again and says, "If you need a recommendation." There is no startle in the second look, no, "Oh, I didn't realize you were here." She has never felt more visible without being trapped. She drifts to the counter. He is there, flipping a paperback closed, thumb marking a place. The register is an old machine married to a newer screen, the past and present sharing a drawer. He smiles, a real one. "Rain again," he says, glancing at the damp silk at her throat. Perfect weather for getting lost in someone else's problems. She should leave. Leaving is how she protects the thin shell of her days. Instead, she touches the nearest book as if to steady herself. "What would you recommend for getting lost?" she asks. He studies her like a riddle he is happy to have. He considers the table, then reaches beneath the counter and pulls out a hardback as if he has been saving it for exactly this question. "Try this," he says. "It forgives you for reading it too fast." Forgiveness. The word feels like heat through a coat. Addie accepts the book not because she needs it, but because she needs the exchange. He bags it, even though she does not pay, and instead of the usual confusion or instant erasure, he watches her with an ease that makes her ache. "I'm Henry," he adds almost as an afterthought, and the name hangs in the air, available. She does not give her own. She cannot trust the trick of it yet. She nods, thanks him, and makes for the door. The bell rings. Air shifts. She steps onto the street and waits with her pulse in her mouth. Then she turns back, pushes in again, and approaches the counter as if she were a new customer who has simply wandered in. He looks up, sees her, and his face lights the same way. "Oh, good," he says. "You came back." No flicker of confusion, no reset. He remembers her. The certainty hits so hard she must put a hand on the glass case by the register to keep her balance. The room narrows to the size of this proof. 3 centuries of absence tilt, and for a moment she thinks she might drown in the simple fact of being seen. She wants to say her name, to see if the sound will hold, but fear tightens like a hand. Instead, she tests in smaller circles. "I forgot to ask," she says. "Does the shop stay open late?" "On Thursdays," he answers without checking anything. "We do readings, you should come." She does not make promises. Promises are doors that closing hurts. She touches the bag, nods, and goes. The bell sings again. The city receives her with its usual hunger, but the air feels different, charged as if a storm had decided to hover without breaking. That night she does not sleep. She sits on the steps of a church that forgets to lock its side door and watches cabs drag gold threads through the dark. She can feel the edges of her life shifting the way ice shifts when a river remembers it is water. At dawn, she returns to the shop and waits until the lights come on. He arrives with coffee, balancing 2 cups. He sees her on the sidewalk, hesitates, then holds one out. "You look like you might need this," he says. She takes it. Heat moves into her hands like mercy. The cup bears the shop's stamp, a tiny drawing of a fox with a book in its mouth. He fumbles in his coat pocket and produces a small square of yellow paper, writes something and sticks it to the lid. She glances down and feels her throat close. 3 words, spare as a key. "I remember you." She looks up too fast, almost drops the coffee. He flushes, embarrassed by his own certainty. "Sorry," he says, half laughing. "That sounded weird out loud. I just meant, you came in yesterday and—" He stops, studies her face as if the expression might be an answer. "Most people blur a little. You didn't. Addie has lived on stage cues and split-second exits. Now she must learn a new performance. Staying." "Thank you," she says, and the words feel fragile, as if truth could bruise. He unlocks the door. "You can come in while I set up," he offers. "If you want." She wants. Inside, the shop wakes in layers. Lights warming, a record spinning a soft circle, the smell of dust turning to the smell of paper and ink. He moves through his opening routine and speaks in a way that leaves room for her to be a person instead of a draft. He asks where she lives and she says downtown, which is always true because she lives wherever the city puts her. He asks what she likes to read and she says love stories that are also something else, which is the best she can do without telling him everything. He does not push. Curiosity without pressure. She almost laughs at the novelty. When the first customers come, she steps back to the poetry shelf and pretends to browse while her heart tries to memorize the room. The hours bend around ordinary tasks, and in each one she finds a new test. She leaves and returns twice. He remembers each time. She asks him later, after the rush, what he sees when he looks at her, bracing for the strangeness that often happens when her curse distorts attention. He looks, really looks, and says, "Someone who doesn't like to be cornered." She cannot help the smile that breaks. Accuracy feels like touch. He suggests lunch. She says yes before caution can catch up. They eat falafel on a bench while pigeons bully the air, and she learns the shapes of his sentences, the places he uses humor to bandage doubt. He tells her about the shop's owner, a woman who built it on stubbornness and second chances. He tells her he almost became something else and not this, and stops there as if the rest of the sentence belongs to another day. She gives him stories that are true without being traceable. A painter she once sat for. A melody she cannot get out of her head. A city she loved before it forgot how to love back. The afternoon softens into the kind of early spring light that lies about temperature. He walks her as far as the corner and does not ask for a number she cannot give. "Come by again," he says, and it is the kindest invitation she has heard in years because it carries no demand. She does come back. She makes a religion of it. The shop becomes a harbor nested inside a city of storms. She brings him small offerings, recommendations, jokes caught on street corners, the way a sentence can turn if you push on the right word. He, in turn, gives her the quiet extravagance of continuity. He recognizes yesterday's conversation. He remembers that she takes her coffee black. He remarks on the silk scarf and notices when it is gone. Nothing in her life has accumulated for centuries. With him, details begin to pile up like snow that finally sticks. Addie tells him pieces of the curse the way one reveals scars under low light. She says she cannot keep things. She says she has trouble with names. She says sometimes she feels like a rumor in her own life. He doesn't laugh. He offers a story of his own. The night he stood on a roof and wished for a different outline. The morning he woke and did not recognize how easily people loved him. The confession is a light turned on down a hall she hasn't walked yet. She files it away, knowing the shape of that light will matter. At closing, he hands her a book and says, "Borrow it." The word is a test she fails so often it no longer hurts, but this time she breathes, takes the weight of the novel, and as she steps to the door, she glances back. "Henry," she says and waits. He meets her eyes and smiles like a person remembering a favorite line. "See you tomorrow," he says. Outside, the city keeps doing what it does best, forgetting on a grand scale, recording on a trivial one. But Addie walks through it holding a book that stays in her hands and a promise that stays in the air. She is not saved, she is not cured, but she is seen, and the shock of it is a kind of rebirth. The days with Henry gather like beads on a string, fragile but gleaming. For the first time in 3 centuries, Addie begins to measure life not in stolen hours, but in shared ones. The shop becomes their cathedral, and every corner is consecrated by small rituals. The way he always turns the key twice before locking the door. The way she always straightens a stack of books before leaving, as if the gesture itself anchors her in place. They fall into orbit naturally, as if the city itself bends to accommodate them. Lunches stolen on benches, walks down avenues where the buildings whisper in glass and steel. Nights where he plays her songs on his phone, tiny universes pressed into earbuds while she closes her eyes and lets the sound stitch her to the present. He tells her he loves music because it remembers for him. She doesn't say that she loves it for the same reason. For the first time, Addie begins to speak. Really speak. She tells him about the village, about the night she prayed to the wrong god. She does not hide Luke's name, though she says it like one might say fire or storm. She waits for Henry to flinch, for his eyes to slide away in disbelief. Instead, he only listens, as if she were reading aloud from a story that already belongs on his shelf. 300 years, he murmurs once when she tells him how long she has walked alone. His voice does not carry pity, only awe and something like sorrow. "And no one remembered you. Not once. Not until you," she whispers. The words are dangerous, but they are true. They do ordinary things, and the ordinariness feels miraculous. They cook together, burning onions and laughing at the smoke alarm. They fall asleep side by side, and when she wakes, he is still there, still looking at her as if she is the first page of a book he doesn't want to end. Each morning she braces for the curse to break him, for his eyes to blur with forgetting. But every morning he still remembers. She learns his secrets in fragments. Henry, with his crooked smile and the way he talks too much when nervous, carries a quiet sadness like a stone in his pocket. He tells her about the panic attacks, about the way the world sometimes feels like a stage and he cannot find his lines. He tells her about a proposal once made and refused, about family ties that pull and snap like threads. He admits that sometimes he feels invisible too, standing in a crowd of people who claim to love him but never seem to see who he really is. It is this confession that cracks her open. For the first time, she does not feel like a ghost haunting the living. With Henry, she feels parallel. Two souls stumbling through a world that never quite fits. They write their story in stolen chalk. On the sidewalk outside the shop, she draws stars, and he laughs and adds constellations, names them after coffee cups and misplaced books. They make lists of things to try. Midnight movies, ferry rides, tasting menus they cannot afford. They cross them off one by one, not because they finish, but because they begin. One night in the quiet of his small apartment, she whispers her name. "Adeline," she says. "Addie." The syllables hover like fragile glass. She braces for them to vanish, but Henry repeats it. Steady, sure. Addie, he says, and the room does not collapse. For the first time since 1714, she hears her name on someone else's lips, and it stays. The intimacy is terrifying. To be remembered is to be vulnerable. To be known is to risk loss. But she cannot help herself. She lets him see her scars, the map of centuries carved into her memory. She shows him the 7 freckles that have haunted paintings across Europe. She tells him about the wars she has watched from the edges, the music she has planted like seeds, the way Luke has always lingered at thresholds, waiting. Henry listens, always listens, and when she falters, he reaches for her hand. The touch stays. The warmth stays. For weeks, Addie feels something she has not dared to name in 300 years. Hope. She imagines cautiously what it might mean to build a life with someone who can remember. To share mornings and seasons, not just nights and fragments. To belong without being bound. But hope, like all fragile things, has sharp edges. In the silence between their laughter, she senses a truth waiting, a shadow lengthening. Henry remembers her. Yes. But memory is never free. The truth arrives without thunder. It comes as a quiet confession on a gray afternoon, the kind of day that makes New York look like a photograph left too long in a window. They are in the shop office, a room barely big enough for the desk and a second chair that was never meant for 2. A kettle clicks, bottled rain at a boil, and Henry stands with his back to her, fingers drumming an anxious measure against the counter. "I need to tell you something," he says, and the air tightens as if the room has taken a breath and forgotten how to let it go. The words have been circling for days. She has felt them in the way he holds her a second longer, in the way his gaze lingers on calendars and clocks. She has learned to read the weather of people. This feels like storm. He turns and his face has the softness of surrender. "I made a deal," he says. "A year ago. I asked for time, a different outline, a way to be liked, to be loved, to finally hold on to something without it slipping through my hands." His smile is a cut, and I was answered. The room tilts. Addie's first thought is not who, because she knows that already. It is when. How long has she been walking toward this moment, blindfolded, guided by a God who understands desire like a locksmith understands doors? "Luke," she says, and Henry nods, relief and dread braided together. "He came to me on a roof," Henry says. "The city was below like a board full of lit pins, and all I could think about was how none of them were mine. I asked to be enough, to be seen, to have people look at me and not turn away." He laughs without humor. "And he said yes. Everything got easier after that. Smiles stuck, conversations flowed, people leaned toward me as if I had finally become the kind of person gravity prefers." Addie feels the recognition like a bruise being pressed. She has watched charm rewritten on faces by unseen hands. She knows the counterfeit shine of borrowed light. "The price?" she asks, keeping her voice gentle because Henry's hands are shaking, because the air feels brittle. "What did he take?" Henry looks at the kettle, not at her. "Time," he says, "my own. I have a year." He swallows. "Less now. 90 days, 89. I've been counting forward because counting backward is a way of falling." The clock on the wall clicks once. The sound is surgical. Addie knows what it is to be held together by calendars. She knows what it is to bleed in days. She steps forward, and when she places a hand on his heart, she is relieved to find it solid, frantic, real. "You made the bargain because you were drowning," she says. "Borrowed oxygen still keeps you breathing." "I know," he whispers, as if he had hoped she would hate him and is terrified that she doesn't. "But I didn't know you, not yet. I didn't know what it would mean to meet someone I didn't have to perform for. Someone who—" He stops. The words crowd at his mouth. I've been happy, actually happy, but I can hear the end coming like a train. Addie has walked beside endings for 300 years, sneaked around them, fended them off like wolves. She has told herself she would rather lose 1,000 strangers than be possessed by one god. She has believed it. She still believes it. But the thought of Henry evaporating at the line where his bargain runs dry tears something open inside her. She imagines him on the same roof, lights spread like a map of all the ways a person can feel small, and Luke there with that patient, merciless smile. She feels rage rise clean and bright as lightning, not at Henry, at the symmetry. Luke had been building toward this as surely as seasons build toward snow. 2 different bargains, 1 hunter, 2 animals walking into the same snare. Henry leads her to the roof that evening as if confession requires altitude. The sky is a lid of pewter, the city's veins pulsing electric down below. He tells the story in full. The way his life felt like a costume that never fit. The way rejections piled into a kind of proof. The way a single no unraveled everything he thought was lovable. The moment he looked at the edge and mistook it for an answer. The way Luke arrived with a hand that looked like rescue and was not. He told me I could have a year as the man I thought I should be, Henry says, fingers hooked in the wire of the fence. A year of yeses. A year of being chosen, being liked, being enough. He laughs again, softer, a sound that hurts because it was built from relief. And it worked. Everyone said yes, the city softened, but it didn't feel like mine, except... His eyes find her. Except you. Wind lifts Addie's hair like a tide coming in. She has been a study in refusal for 3 centuries. She has said no to houses and beds and all the soft corners Luke offered because every offer had bars she could not bear. She has said yes to Henry without realizing it. Yes to dinners, yes to stories told at 1 a.m., yes to a name on someone else's lips. Now the bill has arrived. We are 2 bargains in collision, she says, and the words taste of iron. He nods, his smile raw. I thought if I didn't tell you, maybe the days would stretch, the way a song sometimes feels longer than it is. But secrets shrink time. I didn't want to waste what we have lying to you. They stand in the city's wind, and for a moment it feels like standing inside a bell that has just been struck. Everything hums. She thinks of Luke leaning in doorways for centuries, patient, rehearsing this ending. She thinks of her own vow, stubborn and small and unbreakable. I will not belong to you. She hears a new vow rising beneath it, grafting on. I will not abandon what is real because it will end. Addie turns from the edge and faces Henry. Then we don't waste it, she says. We name the days. We spend them like they are ours. So they do. They begin to live on purpose, not as a defense, but as a declaration. Mornings mean coffee and scavenger hunts for corners of the city neither has seen. Museum wings ignored by everyone else. Pocket parks behind churches, rooftops where wildflowers emigrate by seed. Afternoons mean writing each other into the margins of books they will never return, notes tucked where only they will find them. I am here. Evenings mean meals tasted slowly, playlists built like letters, walks that end wherever the conversation wants to. Time changes flavor when you can see it. They teach themselves to savor. They argue once and learn to argue as if the other person is a place you intend to keep visiting. They kiss like they are answering a question. They fall asleep with her ear on his chest to count down the days by heartbeats because numbers are too clean and hearts are not. Luke comes, of course. He chooses a threshold he has never tried before, the bottom of Henry's apartment stairs. He stands with his hands in his pockets as if the building belongs to him, which in a way it does because everything does, eventually. Ah, he says almost fond when he sees the 2 of them together. My favorite intersections. Addie steps in front of Henry not because she thinks her body will help, but because defiance has always been a posture as much as a principle. Go away, she says, because the simplest words sometimes carry the most weight. Luke's smile is slow. I am not here to collect. Not yet. His gaze moves to Henry and back. I admit surprise. I did not think the two threads would knot. Knots hold, Addie says. Knots also tighten, Luke replies. He lifts a hand, palm open. Be reasonable, little flame. You wanted to be seen. He wanted to be loved. You have both had more than your share. Reasonable is how cages are sold, she says. You taught me that. He tilts his head, amused by the shape of his own lesson thrown back at him. Very well. I'll let your days unspool. He glances at Henry, and something like pity shadows his face, brief as a cloud. It is not in my interest for you to suffer now, he says softly. Suffering later is so much more persuasive. He fades with the stairwell's draft, and the hall remembers how to smell like dust and paint. They climb. They close the door. They stand in the quiet and listen to the lock click as if a sound could be a prayer. After that, every kindness becomes a revolt. Addie leaves notes for Henry where even forgetting could not erase them. A message on the fogged mirror, a word pressed into his palm, the shape of her hand traced on his pillow in the hour before dawn. He tells her stories he meant to write and never did, and she carries them like seeds. They begin a list called If We Had More Time, and then, in a fit of fury at the title, rename it We Have Time Today. She wonders sometimes if love is simply the daily practice of saying yes to a person whose ending you can already see. She decides the answer does not matter. Practice is still a life. She has lived so long on refusal that choosing feels radical. She chooses. In the spaces between choices, fear crouches. It is honest to leave it there. They do not waste breath pretending immortality. Do not paint over the ticking with pretend serenity. They let the sound exist, metronome to their days. The music they make around it is theirs, and beneath all of this, a new thought begins to gather in Addie like weather. Bargains are stories with terms. Stories can be revised. If there is a way to bend a rule, she will find it. She has been leaving fingerprints on art for centuries. Perhaps she can leave one on fate. She does not say this out loud, not yet. For now, she lifts Henry's hand to her mouth and kisses the pulse that proves he is here. For now, they turn the page together and read slowly, line by line, as if language itself could keep the dark at the door. Time phrase, it does not tear all at once. The days with Henry begin to taste of endings, and everything sweet comes edged with salt. He jokes more. He grows quieter in the pauses. He takes to watching the horizon of his phone's calendar as if the date will leap closer if he looks away. Addie learns the softness of his tired, the ones that can be cured with sleep and the ones that cannot. She counts in heartbeats because numbers are kinder than days. They try to spend their hours like coins that never run out. They fail and spend them anyway. Ferry rides where the wind writes poems on their faces. Movies where the projector hiccups and strangers clap when it remembers itself. Meals that taste like reprieve and others that taste suddenly like goodbye. At night they lie on the floor and invent constellations on their ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars. He names one after her, the 7 freckles, then laughs at his theft and does it again. Luke starts appearing the way hunger appears, predictably at intervals that shorten as the end nears. He leans in the shop's doorway while the bell pretends it can ward him off. He rides the subway in a seat no one notices is empty. He stands beside Addie at windows and looks at their reflections and rehearses his victory. You cannot beat a clock by ignoring it, he says, gaze sliding to Henry. There are better endings than the ones you're building. She does not answer. She is busy carrying a book through the city and back again because it is the first borrowed thing that does not evaporate, and she needs the weight. She is busy watching Henry when he isn't looking, memorizing him in ordinary light. She is busy breaking the curse in small, private ways, leaving handprints in cake flour on his counter, a dimple in his pillow, a toothbrush that somehow stays. The last week arrives with the cruelty of a sharp edge. Henry is too calm, the way people are calm when they see a wave and understand that bracing will not change the shape of the water. He begins to sort his life. He writes letters. He cleans the apartment until it looks like an argument with mess has been decided. He folds a shirt as if he is laying it in a suitcase he will not take. Addie wants to throw everything on the floor to ruin the neatness with proof that living is not tidy, but she cannot spend his last days fighting his way of saying goodbye. They go to the roof on a cold night and talk about nothing and everything. He asks her favorite color from each century. She names them: the elm green of 1714, the indigo of a Parisian midnight that smelled like bread, the tin white of spent fireworks on the Seine, the electric blue of the subway's third rail. And now, he asks, and she says, the gold line of sunrise when you haven't slept. He laughs and says, greedy, and she tucks that laugh under her ribs like contraband. On the day before the last day, Luke waits in the bookshop like an omen placed behind glass. He surveys the shelves as if they are a ledger of human longing and finds the account amusing. Henry is in the back. Addie stands between thresholds because she knows his games and refuses, even now, to grant him an easy stage. It is time, he says, as if announcing a curtain call. There is dignity in endings well kept. She thinks of dignity and decides it is a luxury for people who are not being hunted. There is also strategy, she says. He smiles, patient and hungry. At last, she has been rehearsing this without admitting that she has been rehearsing it. Every defiance has taught her the seams of the bargain. Every loophole she carved in art taught her the physics of pressure points. She has one thing he wants that is not her soul. She has her surrender. He wants the taste of it. He wants her to say yes. Let him live, she says. Let him remember me. Luke makes a small, disdainful sound. You ask for 2 miracles and offer me a single coin. That you were never a banker, she replies. You are a collector. Take the rare piece. She steps closer. She smells winter on him and age and the metallic spark of endings. Take me. Not as forfeit, as company. Release him and keep me. He studies her. She can feel the way his attention rearranges the air, the way pressure becomes gravity. You would consign yourself to me, he says, and the words are both caress and collar. I would not consign, she says evenly. I would choose. I will not be taken. I will come. Silence holds for 3 breaths, and then he laughs once. A short flare of surprise, pleasure, triumph. You mistake the shape of cages, little flame. The bars you choose are still bars. Then let me choose them. She keeps her voice flat, keeps her eyes on his. Let him live. Let him remember. Those are the terms. She wants to add a third, let him tell. But she knows that if Henry remembers, the telling will come. Stories cannot help themselves. Luke turns the idea in his hands like an object found at the bottom of a drawer he thought empty, admiring the glint. And when will you come? When he is safe, she says. When I know he will not fall back into your hands at the first dark hour. When I have seen him walk away from this roof. Her voice does not shake on the word roof, even though she sees it as clearly as if they are already there. He tilts his head. I will not be tricked. You won't. She smiles, and it is not kind. You have always been better at tricking than being tricked. Desire and pride play tug of war across his face, and pride, fattened by centuries of victory, wins. Very well, he says. A new term. The boy will live. He will remember you, and you will be mine. He steps closer. The shop's bell shivers, though no one touches it. Do not keep me waiting long. She nods, a soldier saluting the enemy she plans to outlast. That night she does not tell Henry. Not yet. She knows the shape of his love. He would rather spend the last hours begging her not to pay the price than spend them living inside them. Instead, she makes the hours fat with presents. They cook on a pan that sticks and eat pancakes that taste like childhood and late rent. They walk to the river and skip stones that are really wishes dressed as stones. They sit in a church even though neither of them is religious because silence with wood around it is a useful silence. She memorizes him at all distances. The geometry of his fingers, the way he tucks his chin when thinking, the crease that appears in his cheek when he decides to be brave. On the final morning, she wakes to find him watching her. The light is a soft verdict on the wall. He touches her face as if committing a map to memory. "I don't want to go," he says, and the honesty of it rips a sound from her that is not speech. "Then don't," she whispers, and the sentence contains all her planning, all her fury, all her gamble. She has never been good at prayers. She is very good at bargains. They climb to the roof because endings like witnesses. The city spreads itself righteous and indifferent. The wind plays at their clothes, at their resolve. He grips the rail. She grips his hand. Luke arrives without drama, the way dusk arrives, by simply being there once you notice. "It is time," he says again, but now the words feel thinner. She has put a crack in his certainty. Addie steps forward. "We have an agreement." He inclines his head courtly, mocking. "We do." His gaze lifts as if consulting a ledger written in the weather. "The hour is kept." He looks at Henry. "Run along, then. It appears your story has pages left." Henry blinks, sways. Death unhooks itself from his shoulders like a pack set down. He breathes in with a sound like surf hitting sand. He looks at Addie and then at Luke and then back at Addie, understanding nothing of the terms and all of the cost. "What did you do?" he asks. She smiles and says the truest sentence she has ever spoken. "I chose." He flinches at the shape of that truth. He reaches, but she steps back because stepping back is how a promise keeps. "Live," she says. "Write, remember." He shakes his head, tears salt and furious. "No." But he is alive, and life is a treacherous, generous thing. It drags him forward even when the heart claws at the earth. She cups his face. She memorizes this last closeness like flame. She kisses him once more, a kiss that tastes like ink and rain and bravery and ends. "Go," she says. He goes because she has asked and because going is the only way to make her sacrifice hold. He staggers for the stairs, then turns and speaks a promise that anchors her to the moment instead of the abyss. "I will tell them," he says. "I will tell them you existed." Luke's smile is small and sharp. How quaint. Addie does not look at him. She watches the door close behind Henry and lets a single breath leave her body like a banner lowered at dusk. Then she faces the God she has refused for 3 centuries. "I'm ready," she says, "for now." He hears the clause. Of course he does. He enjoys it. "Come along, little flame," he murmurs, offering his arm as if this were a dance and not a war that will take the length of forever. She does not take it. She walks beside him, matching his pace, not his posture. Down on the street, a man bends over a notebook at a cafe window, writing fast as if words might evaporate if he doesn't pen them quickly. Somewhere a camera clicks. Somewhere a press readies ink. Somewhere a story buckles on a pair of boots. Addie descends the stairs, her choice a fresh-made scar. She has given herself up to save the one person who ever saw her, and in doing so has planted a fuse she intends to light. She will not be a possession. She will be a problem. She will not be a kept thing. She will be a kept promise. If bargains are stories, then she will edit this one from the inside. Behind her, a bell rings in an empty shop. Ahead, eternity opens like a door that expects a guest. Addie squares her shoulders and walks in. Eternity is not a straight line. It is a spiral staircase with landings you circle again and again. each one a familiar view you learn to see differently. In the days after Henry walks away alive, Addie discovers that surrender can be a weapon if you hold it by the blade. Luke tests the edge. He brings her to rooms that glow with silks and firelight, to forests where snow hushes the world, to cities that do not yet have names. He treats her as if she is already his, and she behaves as if belonging is a costume she can shrug off at will. He calls her mine, the way the sea calls ships lost. She answers with the meticulous practice of being herself. She refuses his gifts and accepts his vantage points. She studies his habits, the way his power pools at thresholds and frays at places where human will has worn a groove. Doors people love, songs people cannot stop singing, stories told and retold until they harden into ritual. If her curse had seams, his does too. He has never had to notice them. Eternity makes even gods lazy. She will not. They travel. He likes to see her changed by new geographies the way men like to watch fire take to different wood. She watches back. In a candlelit atelier, she advises a painter to leave a corner of canvas empty and let the absence speak. The painting becomes famous for its silence. In a cafe, she murmurs to a young woman drafting a story that refuses to find its center. Begin at the moment of the bargain. The woman blinks, startled by a suggestion that will later become the spine of a book. Addie keeps planting detonators in culture. Small charges that go off years later, leaving craters shaped like her laugh, her freckles, her stubbornness. Luke feigns boredom with her industry. No one knows, he says. You are a rumor at best. Rumors are the beginning of belief, she replies. Belief is the beginning of gods. He smiles, touched and wary at once. Careful, little flame. Flattery is a leash. Then consider it a mirror, she says, and turns away before he can decide which answer angers him more. Nights she is alone with him are the hardest. He can be gentle. He can be kind. He can say her name like a sentence that ends at a door she has wanted to open for 300 years. He offers tenderness the way a hunter offers salt, freely, knowing what comes afterward. Sometimes she watches him when he thinks she sleeps and sees something like hunger cut by loneliness, and the sight almost undoes her because it looks just for a heartbeat like hers. She reminds herself of the roof. She reminds herself of the price. She sharpens the thought into a pin she pricks in her palm whenever his face looks too much like an answer. Time passes, Henry writes. She knows this not because she sees him. She will not risk proximity, not yet, but because the city begins to crackle with a certain story, the way streets hum when a storm advances. A manuscript passes between hands. A line shows up on a poster in a cafe window. A girl the world forgets. She spots the phrase like a flare in fog. He is keeping his promise. He is doing the one thing she asked. He is telling them. Luke senses it, of course. One evening he places a glass of dark wine in front of her and watches her not drink it. The boy is industrious, he says. He peddles a ghost and calls it truth. Truths sell themselves, she says. Stories only carry them farther. He swirls the wine. Say the word and I'll pinch that story like a candle wick. She laughs softly. You taught me that attention is the only altar that matters. Blow at one candle if you like. The room knows the shape of light now. The book arrives. It has a cover that makes strangers pause on sidewalks and a title that feels like a confession offered to everyone and no one. She does not open it in public. She buys it twice, leaves it on benches and watches people pick it up the way the thirsty pick up cups. Alone, she reads slowly as if the paper might bruise, and feels her own life stitched in words that are not copies but translations. The village, the prayer, the shadow in thresholds, the 7 freckles like a constellation only the night can see. Henry writes her not as a miracle but as a person, which is a better miracle. On the last page, he says something that does not summon her by name, but summons her all the same. That some lives refuse to end until they have been turned into story, and that the act of telling is a kind of rescue. Readers argue into microphones and comment boxes about whether the story is true. They make lists of the motifs, the stars, the thresholds, the bargains that keep recurring across centuries of art, and swear they can see a single hand arranging them. They stand before an old portrait in Paris, or a busted statue in Rome, or a photograph in a Bushwick gallery and whisper, "It's her," without knowing why they believe it. Addie walks among these believers and feels the peculiar ache of being found by people who will never be able to point to her on a street and say, "There." It is a generous ache. She can live with it. Luke grows restless. Victory tastes bland when the losing side does not admit defeat. He tries new doors. He invites her to nights where opulence drowns better senses and mornings where the air is so clean the sky sounds like a bell. He tells her he could pull the book from shelves and air if she asks nicely. She thanks him for the offer and refuses. He calls her perverse. She calls herself patient. She begins to keep a different kind of ledger. Not who remembers, but what does. A poem learned by heart, a melody hammered into muscle memory, a story told aloud around tables until the table itself seems to lean closer to listen. She tests limits again. On a rain-glossed night, she presses her palm to a wet brick wall and speaks a sentence only the wall can hear. "I was here." Weeks later, moss takes the shape of her hand. You could call it coincidence. She prefers calling it craft. When she cannot bear the weight of what she traded, she opens the book and reads a single paragraph. When she cannot bear the sweetness of what she gained, she closes it and walks until the city untangles her pulse. When she cannot bear Luke's nearness, she reminds him lightly of their terms. "I came," she says. "I was not taken." He lets her win these petty trials because he believes the larger game already his. He forgets that games are made of moves and moves accumulate. She starts bringing him to places where she knows she has left her fingerprints. A mural layered with the ghost of a face. A sonata with a hesitation no composer can explain. A skyline where one building's window pattern makes a constellation only she recognizes. "Look," she says, not to boast but to keep score. He looks and sees only vandalism on his ownership. He does not understand devotion to traces. He wants signatures. She wants echoes. Time favors echoes. Henry's book goes where books go when they matter. Book clubs, dorm rooms, trains, nightstands. It is forgotten and remembered in cycles, and in each remembering, Addie warms her hands. She imagines a reader in a room she will never enter, looking up suddenly and checking the doorway as if someone might be there. In that impulse, she exists a little more, not as a body, not as a possession, but as the shape a story makes in the nervous system. It will do. There are nights when she stands outside Henry's window and watches shadows move against his walls. She does not knock. She does not want to turn his survival into surveillance. She needs him to be free of the dark's attention, including hers. Once on a different street, she passes him without either of them seeing the other. The knowledge steals her breath for a step and then gives it back twice as strong. Parallel is safer than orbit. Parallel still draws lines on the same map. Time spirals. The staircase rises. Addie learns to live in the wake of her own choice with the competence of someone who has learned every way to drown and every way to surface. Luke grows curious in a sharper key. "How long will you keep this posture?" he asks one night as snow pencils the air. "As long as it holds," she says. "And then?" "Then I'll make another." He laughs, annoyed and fond. "You are teaching me patience. You needed the lesson." He looks at her for a long moment. "Tell me what you want right now." She thinks of making demands that would wound him, of naming freedoms too large and too easy to refuse. Instead, she answers with the smallest, most dangerous request. Time, she says, and a door. He makes both with a gesture. An hour that stretches like velvet. An archway opening onto a street that does not exist yet, where a young artist will one day paint a woman with 7 freckles and never understand why. Addie steps through first. She always will. It is not victory. It is not peace. It is a process, and processes are how the world is secretly remade. Henry writes. Readers believe. Addie keeps seeding the earth with proof that forgetting is not the same as erasure. Luke keeps thinking he is winning because he collects terms while she collects outcomes. The difference is subtle. Eternity prefers subtlety. There will be other bargains. There will be other books. There will be nights when she misses the sound of Henry's key in the shop door so fiercely she must sit down on a curb until the world stops tilting. There will be mornings when she wakes inside a century that still thinks it is new and smiles because newness is a kind of amnesia. And amnesia is the soil where stories grow best. If you listen carefully on trains, in galleries, in a bookstore on a narrow village street where a bell still rings even when no one enters, you will hear it. A name you cannot keep. An idea you cannot shake. A girl moving through your memory like starlight you swear you saw. She wants nothing from you. Or rather, she wants the one thing stories always want. Remember. 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 Remember.